It's always fun when we do it differently. Hey, everyone, this is Kevin the Entrepreneur. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Show. I am your host, Kevin. I said that twice. I don't need to say that twice, do I? Okay, so anyway, folks, it's been about a week since we've done a show here. Things have been kind of crazy, and to let you know for future reference, the schedule might not be completely on par, as they say, because we're dealing with fires and stuff over here. But to reward your patience, I decided we should bring a friend back for this episode, and he's not there anymore. Sorry, folks. I gotta re-invite him. He actually was there. I guess he accidentally clicked out. So let me send. Yeah.
I think we're back.
There you are. I was saying. Anyway, this was our old friend Mark from Mark's Travel Time, not Uber Hints, because he doesn't want to get sued and because he wants to stop promoting Uber, right?
Well, part of it, I just don't want to be associated with that company, right?
Yeah. Yes. In fact, I so much don't want to be associated with a company that my first personal merchandise, want a future, don't do Uber. I don't know if that's actually going to sell, but you can buy that mug below if you want. You could also buy it as like a mask or to a protest or something. I don't know. Obviously, quarantine is driving us nuts, right?
Don't get me on the quarantiner. This cast is going to take a completely different direction.
No, we don't want. No, and we kind of want to. Well, we want to do what we discussed. We were going to discuss yesterday, and it's actually something that's been coming up a lot recently for me personally. I don't know how much it's been coming up from you. Hey, welcome South Coast Ride. But this comment has been coming up a lot. And that comment is, well, Uber was never meant to be a full-time job, as if that actually excuses Uber's abuses to the driver. Like, as if that totally just says, oh yeah, no, it's okay that Uber treats everyone like crap because it was never meant to be a full-time job. But was it really never supposed to be a full-time job? And was it at the very least implied that it was supposed to be a part-time job at one point? That's kind of going to be the main topic. And then we're going to talk about a couple quick little news items. So anyway, to start off, even though I haven't driven for a couple of years, I guess technically I have been on the Uber platform for 5 years at this point. What about you, Mark?
Probably 3 years. I think coming up, I don't know if coming up in December will be my fourth year. My fourth year or my third year, but it's been a number of years.
Yeah, so right, and we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a new CEO at the very least. But let me ask you, have you been doing this long enough to remember, seeing Uber emails saying that you could make like $100,000 a year doing Uber?
Oh God, yes. I remember those. They would really promote that, but that was back when they were offering some pretty hefty headhunter fees as well. But yeah, they really said that you could make not only a good living, but a fantastic living driving for Uber. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And in fact, we're going to share this now so that just to kind of set the tone. This kind of backs up both the things. So first of all, when Uber first came on board, they like to use the word entrepreneur a lot and be your own boss. That was what the original Uber campaign was. They would say aside from, of course, get $1,000 for signing up, which was really nice. I definitely miss those days. But they would say things like, hey, come drive for Uber. Instead of working a 9-to-5 job, you can be your own boss. You could make up to $100,000 a year. And heck, we can even help get you in a car to get you started on being an entrepreneur. Remember those ads?
Yeah, I also remember the people that countered those ads. One of my early videos, if you remember, there was that that gal that talked about how Uber is lying, and I actually defended because I thought that a lot of her logic was inconsistent. Boy, have things changed since those days.
Yeah, hey, let's take a small break and ask, do you still stand by that video, or do you need to make an update, maybe?
I stand by it when it was made. If you were to look at that in today's world, based on everything we know today, no, it wouldn't hold water because so many of the conditions are completely different. There's a lot of the components that are still true. For example, that if people utilize the tax benefits and make sure that they're taking all the deductions they should, that type of thing are still valid. The problem is the pay has changed so drastically and so dramatically that I don't think the opportunity is there now that there was 3 or 4 years ago when I started.
Right. And it should also be noted that while I think Uber was stretching 3 to 5 years ago and they said you could make up to $100,000, you'd have to be a rideshare gigolo to making that kind of money back then. The thing is, they were 70 hours a week and everything like that. But there was that idea planted that for a lot of people, $100,000 was a heck of a lot more money than what their day job was paying. And it's pretty clear that when they would put ads like, we'll help you get into a car to become your own boss, you're going to be an entrepreneur. First of all, we could definitely debate whether or not that's factually true or not. People still think they're independent contractors. I think they're not looking close enough. But can we at least agree that these ads and these emails at least were there to plant the seed that hey, this is something that you could do to be a free employee, basically. Like you become your own business, and if you are your own business, in theory, you should be able to turn it into a livable full-time job, right?
At that time, but that is not the beginning of Uber by any means. I mean, Uber has been around for 11 years now?
Well, yeah, they started as the black.
12 years. Yeah. 12 years. Yeah. So I think if you're looking back at those ads that you're referring to, which were about 4 or 5 years ago, yes, I would have to agree with you.
Yeah, well, we're focusing on those ads because people like you and me and most of the people who watch our channels, those are the type of people that those ads were geared towards. The black car ads and advertising never was. Like, that was geared towards like limousine drivers and chauffeurs, think people like that.
Right.
But if you want to throw that in there, then I think those ads very clearly were making the case that you should quit whatever driving company you drove with, or you should take your private limousine license and you should come do work for us full time. If you want to throw it in there, you could.
Well, yeah, and then they also got the fleet owners involved with that too. The people that wanted to run the fleet programs, which early on never made a lick of sense to me. But we'll get to that. I think we'll cover all that as the program goes on.
Right, I believe so. But the bottom line is, you and I definitely have been around enough to remember these times. So the first thing we have to at least acknowledge is that at one point, whether it was for a black cab or even if it was just for like a regular driver like me, they made a strong case early on that, one of the appeals of doing this wasn't sold as the ultimate part-time job when we were doing it. This was sold as a be your own boss, be an entrepreneur, make a lot of money with us. And when you say things like that, even if they're not stating it outright, there is a strong inclination that maybe you should consider quitting your job and doing this full time, because there's a lot of promise in this.
Well, I would even take it one step further than that in saying that it teeters on fraud.
Well, we're going to get to the fraud.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
I know where you're going with it, but I kind of want to set, I want to set up the understanding so that people who ask us this question can understand where we're coming from. Now, here, let's look at this article that I have been displaying for a while, because this backs up that these emails did exist. This is from the Washington Post, and the headline clearly reads, Uber's program to help you buy a car sounds like a sweet deal, but it's actually risky. And oh boy, this person did not know Travis, that's what his name is. He did not.
Travis Kalanick?
Actually, no, this reporter was.
I can't see the name of the reporter.
I'm sorry. Her name was Emily. Emily was much more correct about this than she realized. So she wrote, about a year ago, Uber announced plans to help drivers obtain the one piece of capital everyone needs to go into business as a transportation, quote unquote, entrepreneur, because that's what Uber was calling us at the time. The company already provided its drivers with smartphones, which they don't really do anymore, but I actually don't even know why they did it in the first place, but it seemed to work. Now all they needed were cars. Since then, Uber has partnered with automakers and lenders to give apparently thousands of drivers the chance to finance discounted vehicles for use with the app. In theory, this has been good for Uber because, the company gets more supply of the one commodity, which is drivers, and that's what it needs the most. And it's good for drivers because they get access to vehicles they might not be able to finance otherwise and at lower prices. Now then, she said, Uber is defining the initiative for saving drivers millions of dollars, but there's no doubt that the program bears one of the hallmarks of this earlier subprime crisis in the housing market. Uber is specifically marketing the program to people with bad or no credit, haven't been able to get a car. Uber says it can get you one in hours. There are several issues that are concerning about this beyond the terms of the loan. From Tiku, in promotional materials, drivers are further enticed to take out loans with the promise that car payments are automatically deducted from their Uber earnings. Those automatic deductions probably sound harmless given that Uber CEO Travis Kalanick, so this is old, has claimed repeatedly that drivers in his leasing program can gross $100,000 a year. But when Kalanick launched the discount to deals last November, he told Bloomberg that the loan program would help ensure that the drivers spend more time working at Uber instead of his rivals. Now, let's pause for a moment there. And I'm hoping people can kind of see why people like you and me rail on Uber for sucker punching a lot of people into doing this full time when they shouldn't have been. Because here's the thing. Not only did they target people with bad credit and therefore gave people loans that were going to probably have a high interest rate, but part of the deal was that they would only drive for Uber. And again, you see that quote, Travis Kalanick is saying up to $100,000 per year. They really did sell that, hey, this is what you want to do. This is a low-skill job. You can get in on it, and you can make $100,000 a year. Now, again, ads today are a little different. Now they try to advertise Uber as the ultimate part-time gig. But what part of this sounds like they were trying to sell as anything but something that you leave your cushy job for and do full time?
Well, they even mentioned in there, when they had the lease programs, and I don't know. I mean, that was something that never interested me in the least. I don't know if they're still offering those lease programs or not. I know Lyft was really big for that. I think they dove into that even more than Uber.
I think for the most part they've stopped.
Yeah, but I don't know that I've heard a good experience from anyone regarding those lease deals. No, I absolutely. I mean, when you talk about having the potential of $100,000, and I think you always have to look at the wording of these things. When he says up to, well, yeah, I guess $7,000 is up to $100,000.
Yeah.
And so we always have to look at the way those things are worded. And that's something, I've always stressed on my channel when I do these evaluations. I always like to read between the lines and say what's really being said, because you have to. It sort of goes back to Bill Clinton. Depends what your definition of is. Mm-hmm. You have to look at every single word they say. So yeah, I think there's no denying it. At one point, they were selling this as a viable and lucrative job.
Right, right. So when you and I talk about Uber and how this is bad for drivers and everything like that, it's probably because we remember things like this, and we remembered not only how Uber used to sell it, but, and I'm speaking personally, I don't know about you, but how I even kind of supported saying, yeah, it's a good deal, and I of course feel terrible about that in hindsight. Like, I was out there with everyone sharing the promo code and saying, hey, it's a great deal, and defending Uber, like, why doesn't the government just stay out of it? It's a great deal for everyone, and things like that. Then as things like this happened, definitely regretted some of those voices.
Well, I don't know about that because I still occasionally will toss my code out there. I don't know why, because it's kind of funny. I don't know if anyone here that's watching this has used their referral code recently. But what really ends up happening is you'll get an email that says, Tony just signed up to drive with Uber on your code. When Tony completes 120 rides, you'll get $10. It's like, are you kidding me? What's even the point? Why do I even have to sign up? But here's been my position on that. My position has always been that if someone is going to sign up, they're certainly not going to sign up simply because there's a code in my description or there's a code at the bottom of my screen at some point. That is not enough to influence somebody to sign up. They're going to sign up, and they're not even going to sign up because they've been watching my videos, because in my videos, I rarely, if ever, have a rah-rah session about sign up for Uber. They're going to sign up because it's something they've been thinking about. It's something they've been contemplating. They've obviously been watching the videos, or they wouldn't have the sign-up code. And they decided to pull the trigger, and since they know me or they're familiar with me, they say, yeah, well, what the heck, I'll use this guy's sign-up code. So I don't have any misgivings or any, bad feelings or guilt or anything about it, because, I know that everybody is making their own decisions. Now, if I was a charlatan, if I was coming up every day doing 3 or 4 videos and talking about how great this is and you can make $50,000, I'd have big-time guilt. But in truth, I'm not doing any of that. So, no, I have absolutely no misgivings about putting a code out there, and I don't think anybody else should either, quite frankly.
Well, I kind of do, for whatever that's worth. I will say, though, that I was always a little suspicious of this car deal, and this is, by the way, where we start realizing where Uber probably it was a fraudulent company to a certain extent, like you said, because we've now established that Uber, at the very initially, really pushed the entrepreneur aspect. You can make $100,000 a year or up to $100,000 a year. We'll help you get into your own car. They did everything they could to really, really promote you and try to push that you sign up for this and you become a full-time Uber driver. And the first people they screwed really was the people who did these car loans, because one of the things was, hey, we'll take it right out of your Uber pay. And never mind that even to this day, there are still people who can't factor in the gas and the mileage into doing this, which they really should. Not only did people not do it back then, but then Uber would cut the rates, and it was never the deal that the rates were going to be that way forever. So you have people investing in a 4 to 5 year loan that now they in some cases they can never hope to pay that loan anymore.
Not now with what they're making off Uber. Well, the other thing is, when you talk about factoring in, we have to look how they paid, because back in the day when they were promoting this as a job, it was a 20-80 split with us getting 80%. Well, at 80%, to me, it made a whole lot of sense, because if the companies wanted to make money, they would adjust the fares accordingly. Once they started monkeying around with that, and we're not going to pay you based on anything that the passenger does, we're just paying you miles and minutes. And you would look at miles and minutes and say, wait a minute, the government has established in this year that it costs 57.5 cents per mile to operate a vehicle. Now, that's not absolute, granted. I mean, I'm going to be able to run a Prius cheaper than than an Escalade or something. But, when I see that an established number like that they didn't pull it out of the air. They base it on something because they're allowing us that in order to make deductions off our taxes. The government is not going to allow deductions based on nothing, right? Is that a fair statement? So if they say it costs 57.5 cents a mile to operate a car and Uber says they're going to pay us 30 cents or 40 cents, it doesn't take a tree full of owls to figure out the math doesn't work here. Right. They have to at least give you what it costs, just to cover your nut, just to break even,
Right. And then these people had these cars and they were, when some people I know at least one person who actually defaulted on the loan of this car, had to, basically has had credit problems ever since. But he decided he was going to do that. Did not realize I made videos about this at the time, by the way. He went entirely off Uber's advertising. And they were paying almost $2 a mile at the time. And so he did the math, and it's like, I could do this for a few years. Heck, I'll even pay a little bit more every month, and then I'll pay off the car faster. And then I think it was even just like a few months later, there was like a 15% rate cut. And he was kind of like, well, I guess I'll do it, but I hope it doesn't go any lower. And it just always went lower. It went up. And interestingly, like, he was doing pretty good driving 30 hours a week, and now he was driving 50 or 60 hours, and then basically decided to give up on the whole affair and said he wasn't going to pay for the car anymore. That caused a lot of problems for his life. But he would not have done that had he realized that Uber would be cutting the rates so much. But because the way that they pay the rates now do not add up to you can make $100,000 a year doing this.
No. And you really have to rely on your tech. I know that my accountant, she called me up because I got a lot of other things going on,
Right.
But she called me up and said, hey, can I see your Uber miles? And I said, why? And she said, well, because you're paying some taxes here. We need to figure out a way to lower your taxes. And, I'm glad I have someone like that working for me because she realizes and recognizes what a lot of people fail to recognize. Of course she does, it's her job. But what a lot of people fail to recognize is those deductions is a lot of the place that we're making our money. But once they start, killing us on that mileage, then, and that's how they pay us. They're not reimbursing us for mileage. That's how we're being paid. And that'll kill you. That'll absolutely kill you.
Right. Exactly. So, right. And yeah, I don't know. I'm also going to say something about how like Uber's whole thing was like the ultimate part-time job is what Uber is now. It was the ultimate part-time job 4 years ago when I rarely drove throughout the week. I usually just drove Fridays and Saturdays and sometimes Sundays, and I'd make, somewhere between $700 to $1,000 a weekend because those were just the lucrative times. And I could have made more money driving throughout the week, but I'm not, as they say, I'm not going to break my back for $1 million I can't take to my grave. I'm going to enjoy life. Like, it was actually nice to have a job that I could only had to really realistically do a few days a week, and I would have all my bills paid. And it's like, I think about it now, it's like I'd have to work the whole week to make that money now.
Well, I'm looking at the comments here, and Eric is not driving said, 2 cars in my garage. I turn on my Uber multiplier 5 times when I run errands so I can write off miles. Now, this is the interesting thing about this, and it relates directly to his Uber a job, because if Prop 22 passes, Eric will not be able to do that. And the reason Eric will not be able to do that is all of the reimbursement, well, not the reimbursement, but the benefits that they are promising in Prop 22 are contingent on the fact that you are not driving for personal miles. So now, if Eric says, I'm going to do it when I'm running an errand, if in any way Uber or Lyft can prove, wait a minute, you were running an errand when, you're not going to get this benefit. You're not going to get this health care or this insurance or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So all that stuff that right now, when we are quote unquote independent contractors come into play, yeah, as long as my app is on, I'm counting those miles. They're going to pull that. And so I think when we're talking about this being a job, we have to consider all these other factors too. And I know this isn't a Prop 22 discussion, but this is a Uber being a full-time job discussion, and that's all going to come into play.
Mm-hmm. Well, not everything. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Prop 22 later, believe it or not, but not everything that Prop 22 or AB5 does is good, obviously. And we all know that Uber and Lyft, especially Uber, they will take advantage of drivers one way or the other in this situation. So, by the way, I have a question to ask because do you get this comment a lot? Uber was never meant to be a full-time job.
Do I get it?
Yeah.
Or are you asking people in general out there?
No, you.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. And I'll tell you what, to get to the meat of it, I agree with that statement. Here's why I agree with that statement. I'm going to go all the way back to conception, okay, when this thing first started. And this is supported by the very term we use, ride share. Mm-hmm. The whole intent was, I'm going from A to B. Someone else is also going to be, and they're kind of along my way, so I'm going to pick them up along that route because I'm sharing my ride with someone else, and they're going to reimburse me. It's almost like the old days when, I'm heading back from school. I'm going to put an ad up on the bulletin board and see if anyone else wants to head to the same town. We'll all chip in for gas. That's what we used to do back in college, right?
All right.
And so people all chip in, and I'm going my same way, but I'm sharing that ride. Well, what Kalanick did was decided, well, let's find an easier way than that bulletin board, in the college commons or whatever, and we're going to do this with an app. But we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going here. Who wants to come along with me? And the whole thing evolved into this mess. So I think wholeheartedly it was never intended at conception to be a job. It was never intended to be that. People started looking at it as a job. Uber realized, oh my God, look at this potential. If we can pitch this as people, rather than just save a few dollars on gas, we can pitch this now as, man, you can make money. In fact, you can live off this. Once it went to that, I think that's when the worm turned.
Which is why the app never showed where the person you were picking up wanted to go for the longest of time.
It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. If it's a true ride share, you should always know where people are going, right?
And they're still fighting that, except for California. Anywhere that doesn't have their own AB5, you still can't see. Well, anyway, I'm going to say, believe it or not, I actually do agree that it was probably never intended to be a full-time job. So why do I treat it as a full-time job?
Why do you do that? What's the matter with you anyway?
What is the matter with me? Here's why I treat Uber like they're a full-time job. And it's really two reasons. It's two very simple but common sense reasons when you stop and think about it. First of all, since that's what Uber sold themselves on for so many years, and they built their company really taking advantage and defrauding people on that promise, I'm going to hold their feet to the fire on that a little bit. Like, no, you for a long time said this was a full-time job, so I'm gonna hold you to that because you hurt a lot of people that way. And then the second reason is I don't know what kind of people tell you that it's not supposed to be a full-time job, but most of the people who tell me that it was never meant to be a full-time job ironically drive full-time doing it, if not more.
I don't know. I don't get.
But
I don't get a whole lot of people anymore that watch my channel, at least a comment, that say that they're doing it full time. I mean, I really don't get that many people that do that. Other than that guy down in Chicago, I I just don't hear it from too many people.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a lot of people. It's just and I hear it. I hear it a little. Well, I hear it more and less somehow. I hear it more from those people who I know drive full time, and I hear or close to it. But I hear it less from people overall. So
Well, I wonder when they talk about sorry about that. I wonder when they talk about driving full time, do they mean they're putting in full time hours, or they're doing this as a full time job and their only source of income?
I tend to believe that they're putting full time hours into it. Actually, in some cases, it can be both. Like,
Well, yeah, but I think if you're doing it full time hours and it's your only thing you're doing, and I don't mean a retired guy that's supplementing his income with Social Security and a pension.
No,
I'm
that's not what I'm
talking
talking about.
I'm talking about a real person that is simply doing this as their job, and they're doing everything, man. They're paying their health insurance. They're paying for a house and a car and putting food in the mouth of a family. Can they really do that with rideshare anymore?
Yeah.
I think it's doubtful.
I don't think so. The people that I know who do this full time and really depend on it, they drive a lot of hours. They don't have a lot of time off, and they always seem to be having a hard time paying the bills. There's only one guy. There's this one guy, and he never gave me permission to out him, so I won't say who it is. There was one guy who, in the comments, would brag, "I work 3 days a week and make $3,000." Well, $2,000. He said actually $2,000 to $3,000. And I remember feeling so confident that wasn't true. I said, "Yeah, you have my email address. You know where to send those screenshots." And he did. And I actually called him on the phone and said, "Hey, congratulations, man. You really figured this out." And he has another business, so if Uber ever shut him off, he would miss that income, but he would not be on the street per se.
But I have to say this.
That's the only success story I've heard in all this.
I have to say this though. People that pull down, and we've all had those weeks when we've made $1,200 and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think all they're looking at is their gross income. Well, I don't think they're really looking at what it is costing them. And a lot of people, all they do is say, "Well, okay, I made $1,200. I paid out $250 in gas or whatever. So I still made $950, or I don't remember what number I said there." And they're forgetting, well, wait, there's a lot more to it than that, than just gas. I mean, you're paying for insurance, you're paying for wear and tear in your car, you're paying more oil changes, tires. There's so much other, and not only that, but your time. So if you don't include all that stuff, you're fooling yourself. So someone just showing a screenshot that says here's $1,000 means nothing to me, because I don't know what they're really making.
Well, they shared the screenshots that was $2,000 to $3,000, and they showed multiple weeks, and they showed that they were working. Granted, it was 30 hours, so on top of the full-time job, I did wonder about their family life. But so of course, when you do topics like this, you always get comments like this, I do this full time, I'm able to pay for mortgage and everything else. I mean, I don't know. You're always, of course, always welcome to email the proof, but there's a reason there's not a lot of the YouTubers that started when we were doing this no longer do this, and it's also not a secret why you, me, Randy. Started talking about other things at one point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're seeing a couple people in this room. We only have 34 people here. We're seeing a couple people that are saying, yeah, we do this for a living. So bravo.
Yeah. Yep. So, Scott says this. I watch you, both you guys still do full-time hours, but only try to milk Surge in Phoenix. Don't drive at regular rates. You will lose by. Currently working zero because I'm scared of getting COVID. So, okay. Fair response. So the funny thing about this is that I actually do kind of agree with you. I believe that this was never intended to be a full-time job. I don't think Uber really had it figured out, but I do know that Uber took advantage of a lot of people. They ripped a lot of people off. They put a lot of people into financial ruin off promises that I fully suspect they did not intend to keep, and somehow this wasn't illegal. So what can I say? I mean, maybe this is the main reason why, even when a few people come by and they say, it's still working for me, please don't take away my independent contractor status, I just kind of shrug now and say, you're not an independent contractor. You never were. Nothing Uber has ever told you has turned out to be true. And, I think you just need another job.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because legally, you're an independent contractor, whether or not they treat you as such, but legally you're an independent contractor. And I think
that's why they're being challenged in court.
As the people it's challenged in court in one state, well, two states. As people in this room are, confirming, Sniper King says they pulled down 120 grand last year. So people are still making it work. They're still figuring it out. But, I think that takes a lot of thinking. And I think the average person is not prepared to put in that much time and effort. And it was always my assertion that you have to learn your market. You have to drive smart. There are people who say, well, I get up at 6, sometimes I don't get my first ping till 10:30. Well, then I wouldn't work those hours, because they're wasted hours, and then that's just a real simple example. But also knowing where to go, during what hours, when to switch over to eats, when to switch back to riding, all that stuff. I used to call myself a full-time part-timer, or a part-time full-timer. I don't remember which one I used to say, but because my travel schedule, which is all going to hell now, in 2020, but my travel schedule always allowed me to be home for at least a week at a time. And during that week, I used to hit Uber hard and heavy. Mm-hmm. And, there might be 3 other weeks that I'd be traveling and I couldn't. So that's the way I always perceived it. So when people said, well, who are you to talk? Well, I kind of was living the full-time life once in a while. Now, all bets are off. And, I think people are in for a rude awakening in California if either one of these things happen. If Prop 22 I think they're damned if they do, damned if they don't now, and I don't think anyone's going to be happy either following the Prop 22 outcome or following the AB5 outcome, because I think both of them are going to put severe limitations on drivers.
Yeah, really. At the end of the day, would have been better if they'd gone after how much Uber could lower the rates. It would have been better to go after getting back, pushing for an 80-20 split, and working off a percentage of what the company's bringing in from a customer. That is the only fair way to charge. It really is. It's the only fair way to pay somebody. And that might have even forced Uber to raise the rates, because then when they did the upfront surge, and then they would be taking sometimes up to half the fare if it was made into law, like you can't take more than 20%. Well, then Uber's got to work with that limitation, and they might have had to raise the rates. In all fairness, as much as I'm totally okay with AB5 becoming a thing, because I think people need to get a job that isn't so abusive. There was a simpler thing you could have attacked Uber on, and Uber wouldn't have been happy, but a lot more people, but the drivers probably still would have been happy. So anyway, that's where we are. Well, since we're speaking about Prop 22, and this is where there's going to be that cut to, so we can cut it up into separate segments.
Here it comes.
Yeah, let's move on to main topic number 2. And I at first was not going to make a video about this. I didn't think there was a lot to say about it, but the more I thought about it, the more it's this is actually a little bit more interesting when you really digest it. So let's look at this article from the Los Angeles Times. And it has a very grabbing headline. Uber and Lyft just made their campaign to keep exploiting workers the costliest in history. Now, This is a opinion column. It's not a fact-based column.
I was just going to say, I hope that is an op-ed, because that would be a terrible title for a news story.
Yeah. So this word, that's an opinion. But inside there is some interesting numbers. Like, let's doff our hats off to Uber, Lyft, and their fellows in the gig economy. Having created a model of exploiting workers and obnoxiously browbeating local officials to get their way, opinions, it should be noted, but opinions I agree with, they have now set a record for spending on a self-interest ballot proposition.
Have they really? Wow.
Yeah, the $70 million in new contributions to their campaign to pass Prop 22 on November's ballots, disclosed Friday, adds to the more than $110 million already contributed, bringing the total to $181.4 million that has been spent to try to get Prop 22 passed. And we're still like more than a month away from the actual election. So anyway, this guy goes on to make a lot of sarcastic, funny comments about how this is an obscene amount of money being spent to continue to exploit workers. And again, you can agree with that or not, but I really had to stop and look at that, like $181.4 million spent. I mean, Uber has never spent a cent to try to treat their drivers better, but they are spending $184.4 million for this thing to pass. And I don't know, what do you think of that? Because I mean, you've made enough videos to know that when Uber has a position, it most likely cannot be trusted. They've usually got ulterior motives. They're usually not holding this position in your interest. They're holding it in their interest. And the fact that they're spending this kind of money to get it passed, what does this say to you about what Uber thinks of all this?
Well, I knew from the start that come January 1st, nothing was going to change. I'm talking about this past January. I knew nothing was going to change because I knew that they would fight that tooth and nail. I knew they would never concede. What it shows me is that they are more nervous than even I thought they were. If they're pumping this much money in, they're really, really running scared. The other thing that scares me, though, is, and I mentioned this in a video I did a week or two ago, that they are authoring this proposition. Now, I don't know exactly who authored it and you know what the conglomerate was that put this thing together, but I dissected this about a week ago, and there was one term in there that really shook me up, and that was the way that they determine how much you drive. And it was being defined as from the time you accept a ride until that ride ends. And anyone here that's in this room knows that a lot of your time is, I mean, sometimes you can get ride after ride after ride, but if you take the actual time that you are actively, from the time you accept the ping till the time you end that ride and you drop someone off, that is really different from how much time you put in, like driving, for example, to pick up that fare.
Right.
And I'm thinking, this is terrible. That's terrible. And to think that either it's going to be AB5, which I think is terrible, or it's going to be Prop 22, which I think is terrible. What I really think is going to happen, and I know you didn't ask me this, but my prediction is neither of those things is going to end up being what really happens. I think something, I'm not sure what it is, we won't know until after November 3rd, but something is going to bring them both back to the table. And I think you're going to have to get the zealots out of the room. You know, I think people like Gonzalez is going to have to be out of there because she doesn't understand. She thinks she's doing good, or maybe she's just doing political posturing, but she really doesn't understand the ramifications of her own legislation.
All right.
But I do think that neither one of those is good for a driver. And I think, you know, we're hearing these people here in the room that talk about how successful they are. I bet those people would not want to operate under either one of those models.
Probably not. But, you know, again, we're talking about Uber as the company. And by the way, we're just talking about Uber. I mean, this is not even considering the money that Lyft and DoorDash and, well, I guess Postmates is now Uber.
Oh, that was just Uber? Okay.
Yeah, that was just Uber.
Yeah.
So,
well, of course, Uber's the big boy in the block too, and others know they can come along for the ride. It's kind of like being Canada. Canada doesn't have to pump a whole bunch of money into their defense because they're sitting next to Big Brother. So I think that's the same thing when you talk about these other companies. Why would they join in? They don't have to if they know someone else is going to. It's sort of like the UN. Well, yeah, a lot of people aren't going to pay their part because they know the U.S. is going to pick it up. That's kind of where Uber is in the rideshare community.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting because, I mean, look, I know you don't like AB5. I don't know if I completely like it either. You don't like, but my whole thing is, years ago I used to make eBay videos on my other channel. And one of my big things was that I would complain about PayPal a lot. And eBay got a lot of pressure from people to have alternate payments other than PayPal. They wanted Google Pay. They wanted Amazon payments. They wanted all these things, which we're talking about 10 years ago. So electronic payments wasn't even the kind of business it was today. Well, eBay fought that for so long, and then finally they allowed alternate payment methods called ProPay and Skrill, and they sucked. Basically, eBay allowed the two payment services that were significantly worse than PayPal to be allowed on the platform to basically encourage people to sign up for PayPal. And I remember another eBay tuber out said at the time, if eBay supports it, I'm suspicious of it. I'm kind of that way with Uber. Uber is so far removed from caring about what the drivers want or need that when Uber supports something, I'm suspicious of it. And when they're this much in support of it, to where they're like breaking records on money that's spent on a piece of legislation, I cannot really help but think that, I think this thing failing can only be a good thing if Uber wants it this badly. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, they're running scared. And if they weren't, they wouldn't be offering up their own option. The problem is, I don't think their option is a good one either. And I think California drivers are between a rock and a hard place, quite frankly. And I think they are there largely because of the shenanigans and hijinks that Uber and Lyft were pulling anyways with the way that they started paying, and we've that's all water under the bridge or over the dam or wherever the hell the water goes. But, we've discussed this ad nauseum. I just think that they led themselves here. And so as a result, people are overreacting, and AB5 was an overreaction. And as a result, we're in a bad place right now. And Uber's scared. Drivers are scared. I don't know anyone that's happy right now with that situation.
No, I don't know anyone who's really happy. And one of the sad things about this is, of course, my own personal opinion is I've really been pretty vocal in the last year or so, probably more so than any other Uber tuber. I'm probably obnoxiously harsh.
You obnoxious? Nah.
Yeah, no, I'm just a little obnoxious. When I tell people to get out of this, and I push them and I tell them, look, whether they deactivate you or there is a situation that pushes you out, you're not doing this forever. And they're not going to protect you. And unfortunately,
sure.
we know some people, including one other Uber tuber who was forced off the platform in the most unusual way, and thank goodness he's all right. But it's the bottom line is like all these people get deactivated or they get pushed out, and then they're stuck. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm perfectly okay with AB5 or even this standing, because it's like, the pain's got to come sooner or later. Just push them out now, because otherwise people will just keep doing this until because they get stuck in a rock and a hard place anyway with this.
See, I've never agreed with that philosophy throughout the baby with the bathwater. Yeah, I just don't. I have a friend that, well, I don't want to get into politics, but that made a similar thing, years ago. And he said, well, it's got to get bad before it gets good again. I disagree with that. I think, all this is going to lead to is further legislation. That's ultimately what's going to happen. Whatever happens with the election, whether with AB 5 or Prop 22, it's going to change again because people are constantly going to be challenging it. And I think they're spiraling down a rabbit hole there in California.
Well, and the reason I agree with it in this particular case, I don't always agree with this, but it's a case-by-case basis, but Uber has just shown no interest in improving it whatsoever, and they've proven, even with this thing, like they basically had how much time to figure out an employee-based Uber would look like, and then they threatened to shut down their services because apparently they didn't figure this out, which of course they have just shown that they are so uninterested. In fact, they are actually almost dedicated to going against.
See, I disagree with that too. I think they know. I think they have 7 plans, 10 plans, 20 plans. I think they're not going to roll them out. Why would they roll out a reasonable plan if they don't have to?
That's what I'm saying, though. I'm saying that is what I did say, that they have plans. They just are dedicated to not making this any better. So look, if all you're going to be doing is legislating this from here until the end of eternity anyway, then just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Let someone else who might do this properly do it.
Oh boy! So now you open the door and you want to talk about Trip, huh?
No, no, I do not. But anyway, folks, that's the end of that topic. So, what do you think about this? We'd love to know. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Mark? I'm sure you agree with Mark more, but what the heck? Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. All right. So with that out of the way, I think we could. Nah, I'm actually really not interested in this topic that much anymore. Were there any comments that we want or questions we wanted to answer real quick? Like, did anyone say anything that stood out to you?
It's your turn, everybody. Questions, concerns, issues, complaints, whines, moans, any of those we'll accept. I'll give the complaints, the whines and moans over to Kevin, and I'll take the accolades and the attaboys.
Yeah, that's what you do anyway, so, I'm better suited for that, right?
Anybody? They're too busy here talking about Bob Crane and his aberrant behavior.
Who's Bob Crane?
Bob Crane was Hogan from Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, I've never watched Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, he was also in some Disney films in the late 60s and early 70s. He was in Superdad and some others.
Didn't see Superdad.
But Bob, he was a freak. He was kind of a weirdo in real life. We don't have to get into Bob Crane. You can watch my other channel if you want to learn about Bob Crane.
Yeah, pretty much. Let's see here. Scott says, "You guys see Dave the Uber Slaves video? I think he's correct about fake YouTube Uber posts constantly being generated supporting to keep Uber drivers as independent." Well, I'll say this. It's not like it's the first time Uber would have done something like that. I mean, I'm also been doing this long enough to remember when they used to hire people that were dedicated to calling lifts and canceling the rides. In fact, here's a fun story to share. Way back then when I was first doing this, I was visiting my parents, and you can do Uber and Lyft while you are up there. So I had the Lyft app on, and I got like a ping, and I accepted it, drove a little bit, and then they canceled it. And then they called again, and I kept moving closer and closer to the house. And I actually got to the house, and they were still calling and canceling. So at one point when they called and I accepted, I got out of the car. And by the way, folks, I don't recommend you ever do this. I was a hothead that night, but I was annoyed. I went to the door and I knocked on it. And it's the door. I'm like, "So you keep calling me. Why do you keep canceling?" And the lady said, "Oh, it's my job to cancel Lyft rides."
Really?
Yeah.
It's their job. Well, that's interesting.
It's like, so Uber has at least been known to hire people to call Lyft. I don't think they'll do that. They'll do this today because Lyft's way too big for this to make an impact anyway. But back then, Uber was definitely big enough and Lyft was small enough that Uber could actually like waste Lyft drivers' time. Oh, look, we've got Dustin in the house. He's like, yes.
Hey, Dustin, how you doing? Man, this is the second live stream in a week that you've dropped in on me.
Yeah. Oh, that's why he's here. I see. So anyway, well, there's...
Wait, John, what am I missing?
Yeah. I don't know. So let's see here. How about the BS in the Uber app about how people just totally agree with Uber? High agreement percentage agreeing quotes. Yeah, that's another thing about like Dara Khosrowshahi. That's, you know, he's a politician and he's becoming less of a good one where, you know, he went on Harry Campbell's interview and he highlighted all the things that people were concerned about driving for Uber. And it's like, and not a single person ever raises the fact that they're not being paid enough. Like in your world, no one ever complains about the rates. No one ever complains about the unfair deactivation policy. It's always benefits.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? That's where the discussions are now. It's just on benefits.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Well, if no one really has any questions, folks, I guess we're gonna be wrapping this up. So anyway, a fun story. We did have Cecily for like a hot second, and we were going to be doing another monthly rideshare podcast, but she couldn't make it. So it's just the two of us again. Anyway, folks, I'm Kevin the Entrepreneur and Mark from Mark's Travel Time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for commenting. And if you watch this live stream after the fact, you can continue to comment below. Take care, everyone. Stay cool out there and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.